I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of Podiatry Marketing. With me, as usual, is my good friend who lives on the other side of the world. It is Big Jim Mack. How you doing today, Jim?
Tyson, I'm doing well. As we were talking before the podcast started, we're looking forward to an opportunity maybe to meet each other in the flesh, which would be something really, really exciting. To make sure we both exist, I guess.
I know it's not too yet. We will. We will. We're going to meet in the flesh. And I was talking to Big John and Lucinda at the Foot and Ankle Show, and yeah, they were surprised that we had never actually met each other. And I started to say, well, I'm actually wondering if you're just an AI generated person I've been talking to for the last 5 years, but I will find out soon.
Yep, sooner than later.
So, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today's topic is, you're not behind. The uncertainty is the hard part. So the question I get asked more than anything isn't about Google Ads or SEO. Usually it's, where do I start? And that question isn't really about tactics. It's really about uncertainty. So, I practiced podiatry for 7 years. I know what it feels like to have everything kind of mapped out for you, whether it be school, residency, and practice, and still feel like something isn't working. So that uncertainty can really be it can be taking the next step, whether it's fixing your marketing or rethinking your practice entirely. It kind of keeps podiatrists stuck more than kind of any lack of information will.
That is actually a really good point because it is when you're going through university or your whole education from the time you're a little tacker all the way through to graduating, everything is mapped out for you. This is what you do here, this is what you do the next year, the year after that. Everything is planned out. Then all of a sudden you graduate or you set up your own business and that structure isn't there. So I can see how it can be scary for some people.
Yeah, and some people just, they're kind of professional students in a way, right? They learn the techniques to study and how to pass exams and do those things and feel like, that's not really how the real world works though, right? So it could be a bit of an eye opener once you get into the real world and try to figure out, okay, so what do I want to actually accomplish? Because it's kind of a choose your own adventure game at that point. It's not there's not a prescription
I
for
like that.
what you have to do, right? So
Yeah, and I do recall there were some students that were, when it came to exams, were excellent at studying and passing exams. You could ask them 2 days after the exam a question that was based around probably what we had learnt and what was in the exam, but if they had to actually think outside of the box, couldn't do it. It had to be textbook and planned out for them.
yeah, it can be a different skill set. So, today's episode's a little bit different. It's kind of about more about why, most podiatrists kind of stay stuck, how to shrink, but it's also about how to shrink this fear down to like a regular size. And the one thing you can do this week is, try to help you move forward if people are feeling a little bit stuck.
Okay, so where do we start?
We're going to start with the certain misery. And, while you
That
stay stuck,
sounded terrible.
I know it's bad, but it's some people feel that way, right?
Yeah.
People stay stuck and they really don't know what needs to change. So, a dull schedule doesn't mean a healthy practice, right? I talk to podiatrists who tell me, they're slammed in the same conversation. They say they're not making what they expected. So, full schedule and thin margins leads to professional unhappiness. Nobody in school taught you, that a day packed with routine nail care is a very different business than a day with surgical consults, maybe shockwave, custom orthotics. Your website's outdated. Patients are Googling you and maybe choosing the competitor. But the uncertainty of changing anything kind of keeps some people stuck. And doing nothing isn't safe. It just slows you down and kind of moves you further away from your goal. So, your people are paying for inaction either way. People sometimes just prefer to delay than take that first step.
Yeah, it's true though. I know people, but they'll say they are absolutely flat out. But then you'll overhear in another conversation, and they're talking about trying to get money together for school fees for the kids, and you're sitting there shaking your head, going, "Hang on, how can you be that busy and saying that you're flat, you're booked out 3 months ahead, yet you can't, you're struggling to pay your bills." So that must be a terrible place to be in your career.
No, it's tricky, right? Because like we talked about, that it's 4 years of podiatry school in the U.S., 3 years of residency, and then you just jump into practice. And maybe some people are lucky enough to have spent time in either private practices or kind of feel really drawn to a certain part of the profession that gives them fulfillment and they feel like they know what they're doing. Maybe they had a relative or a parent or someone in the profession that could give them a little bit of guidance. But I think there's a real lack of mentorship sometimes. And, it can lead to that kind of busy but broke paradox where people have busy schedules, but they're not seeing the type of patients they want to. The margins are relatively thin. The case mix, is more volume than kind of the high value stuff that they want to see. So it's a really, really important thing to be deliberate about the types of patient you're seeing and the kind of the signals you're sending out there to kind of build the practice you want to build.
Yeah, well, I think if you're in that busy broke sort of paradox too, it all just starts with I think realizing that's where you are at, and then just start making those small changes. You can't just make dramatic changes overnight. You just got to do it over a gradual period of time.
No, consistency is key. And like we talked about, the cost of inaction compounds, 3 or more years of the wrong patient mix is 3 more years of losing surgical cases to the practice across town and you kind of diminishing some of your skills. 3 more years of a 2014 website representing you to every person who searches your name. Like it has damaging effects on your reputation. It's funny to think about that, but there's more of those out there than you would really expect. So what feels like you're playing it safe is actually almost a guarantee that you're going to get an outcome you don't want. So you got to arrive, you got to build up consistently and slowly, but you need to make sure you're taking steps in the right direction. Otherwise, you're going to be 3 to 5 years down the road and heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I'm always surprised when someone has their website and they have not spent the money. And these people will sometimes have clinics where that they are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I mean, they're a profitable business, and they still do their own website, or the kids do the website, or the friend down the road in the garage does the website. They do not have a professional person doing the website for them. And I can never understand that.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking, but especially as we become more and more digital every year, right? So just those lost that kind of opportunity costs associated with not, you know, staying with the trends and kind of being visible online. Yeah, it's can definitely bite you, if not now, down the road.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine, Nikki Jerd, who, like yourself, does websites, and she said to me, "You know what? I could also dig out my own ingrown toenail." She said, "But it'd be funny if I said that to a podiatrist. Said, am I better just to treat my own ingrown toenail at home, or should I see a professional who does it?" And they would all say, "You should see a professional who does it every day because it will be done right." And then you say, "Oh, so you have a professional do your website?" "Oh, no, I do it myself because it's cheaper and easier."
Right.
So it's sort of I don't if people can actually see um, the double standards in that.
For sure.
So yeah. Anyway, what's next, Jim?
So next is fear lives in the vague, and so when you make something specific, you can actually kind of go after that scary thing, right? When things are a little bit more specific, it's a lot less scary. So, I'm going to invest in marketing, and what if it doesn't work? That's kind of very terrifying because it's very vague in nature. Your brain fills your head with kind of the worst potential outcome. But getting specific kind of helps shrinks that down. So, say you spend $1,500 a month on Google Ads for heel pain, you run it for 90 days, that's $4,500. It's not generating appointments. You just pause it. You spend $4,500 and you learn exactly what doesn't work in your practice. So you still have your practice, you still have your patients, you still have your license. They're not taking that away from you. Now you compare, one empty appointment slot at $300 on average. That's 6 figures a year in lost revenue. So that $4,500 risk, looks like a different number when you can kind of quantify it with some real numbers in your practice.
Sometimes too, you're investing $4,500. How many patients do you really need to get in to at least just get your money back?
Yeah.
And if you're doing that over a 90-day period, I reckon you could be running one of the worst ads in the world. You would probably still at least get your money back. But like you said, if you're doing it and you're not getting anything, you've still learned what didn't work. And you can either pause it, you can tweak it, you can make changes to it, and you'll find you will get your money back, if not more.
Yeah, I would say the moment you kind of attach real numbers to specific decisions, then it's almost, that problem gets much and much smaller and the fear gets smaller. Like I talked about the scenario with the Google Ads, The worst thing you can do, if you're out $4,500, it's not the best thing in the world, but it's not also catastrophic. It's something that you can really take a lesson from, move on, try something different. Life is all about learning, taking a certain amount of calculated risk. And if you're just always playing it safe and you're not kind of going after these opportunities, some of them are going to work out, some of them aren't, but like you don't know until you try.
Yeah, and how much risk did people put on the line when they decided they were going to become a podiatrist? How much money was invested and was on the line with no guarantees you were ever going to pass or you're ever going to be qualified? But they go, oh yeah, but that's just a natural thing that you do. It's part of the stage of life that you got to go through. I'm thinking, well, this is exactly the same with your business. You've got to put money out there. You've got to invest it in marketing in one way or another. That's just part of the natural progression of a business.
Yeah, that's true. And as much as we would put numbers on things too, sometimes it's not actually the financial thing that people are most fearful of. It's looking foolish. It's
Yeah.
worrying about what colleagues or a spouse or like a partner in the practice will think. It's admitting you need help with something, you feel like you should already know. You're a doctor, you're a foot doctor, a podiatrist. You went to 4 years of school and residency, and you should know all these things, right? But we have to also know what we don't know, and you're not supposed to have all the answers. So admitting you don't know how to market your practice can feel like a weakness to some clinics or to some people I work with.
Yeah, I think you just got to accept you don't have the skills in every area. There was a dentist I was talking to recently, and then I heard him on this podcast say the same thing. And he said he already knew when he started as a dentist and was working that he was never going to be in the top echelon of dentists. His skill set just wasn't that good. He just wasn't that good. He was good, but he wasn't that good. He was never going to be a standout. But he really loved business. So he knew that it was something he was naturally good at. So therefore he put a lot more time and attention to it and ended up building an exceptional business. But he had more of an interest in that. It didn't come naturally to him, but he knew that if he put the work in and and made that decision that I'm going to be good at business, he said, then things just fell into place for him. I think
That's a
everybody
great
else can do the same thing.
No, that's a great point. Some of the podiatrists that I know that are growing the fastest got comfortable saying, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to find somebody who does, as opposed to like,
Yeah.
I'm going to take on another burden. I'm going to take on another thing and have to learn and spend time with. So it's a pretty common thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I've done in the past where I wish I had outsourced it to somebody else and just had them do it and just focused on where my time and attention was better spent, which is why I never have designed my own website. Wouldn't even know where to start.
Not a
I've,
bad thing.
I've no idea. I have no idea on how to do a website, but I do know how to, once it's built for me, and to get in the back end, I can change as many things as I want. But the actual doing it, no, and I'm not interested. I don't want to learn how to do it.
For sure.
That's your job, Jim, not mine.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
Yeah. So next is just realizing that you're not the only one. I've got an example here of like three podiatrists, three paths with the same uncertainty. Three podiatrists I want to tell you about. One left practice entirely to build something new. One transitioned from clinical work into becoming an editor at a podiatry publication. One stayed
Yeah.
in practice and built, systems in a practice they love. Three really completely different paths, but the common thread is that all three hit a point at some point in time where there was no playbook and kind of no guaranteed outcome. So the people that will tell you that they've got it all figured out, they're full of shit. I mean, like everyone's still trying to figure out what you want to do. Maybe they have good systems or a good team. Maybe they're not completely full of shit, but but at the same time, everyone started doing kind of their own thing, maybe with some help along the way, some mentorship. But at the worst case, these kind of three people I talked about, the worst case scenarios, none of those things happened. The actual hard parts were the things that they never thought to worry about. If you're waiting for certainty to take action, you're going to be waiting forever. So it's a really important thing to like be okay with the uncertainty.
Yeah, I think the amazing part now is there is so many podiatrists who have done so many cool things that whatever you're thinking about doing, I think that path, there's already been trailblazers there that have already done it, that have done things similar to what you want to do. Now, if you're coming up with something completely different, yep, you've got to create a whole new path. But there's a lot of information out there in a lot of different areas. You just got to tap into the people. Like even yourself, with what you're doing with online ads. You go back 10 years ago, there was no podiatrist that I knew of that was actually doing that. But you might have known some, but I didn't. I didn't know any.
No, I didn't. And at the time I didn't. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when I started my first podcast, I didn't know any other podiatrist that was doing podcasting. But now there's like 35 of them or something. They're everywhere. It's podcasts all over the place.
Yeah, there's quite a few out there, but it's kind of like talked about. There's just different paths. Like there's you and I who kind of like, we both practiced for a while. Now we're doing something different. Like I mentioned, the example of the person who's an editor at a publication her name is Jennifer Spector. She's a board certified DPM. She spent like 12 years in practice, and then she really got involved with leadership, and she's always had a passion for writing and editing. And she found her way out of clinical practice into doing something like that. And then, the only guest we've had so far on the show, Don
Yeah.
Pelto is a guy who,
Oh, Don.
along with kind of like, having a successful practice of his own, he loves marketing. He loves, sharing kind of educational ways to help his patients get better. So, I mean, everyone kind of forges their own path a little bit differently. There's no cookie cutter way of going about doing it. You can find your own path, and there's going to be some uncertainty along that way, but that's kind of what makes it fun in some ways.
It is, but yeah, like I said, I enjoy the uncertainty because it makes life exciting. Everything was just really planned out, and I knew I did this when I was at the Foot and Ankle Show. We went to a dinner for Plan 365, and one of the questions and asked if I could do a little talk. And the first question I asked them was, if you knew you could do anything you wanted and could not fail, that it was 100% guaranteed it was going to work, what would you do? What risk would you take? And you can see everyone looking around, actually thinking about it. But then what I was there to talk about was about how you set your fees. And I said, if you knew that you could set your fees at whatever level you wanted and no patient would complain, that it was a guaranteed you were going to win, would you do it? Every single person put their hand up. I said, just do it, because you won't know until you do it whether that will be the case. You could be fearing something that's never going to happen.
No, absolutely. That's a great point.
So what's next?
So next is that just realizing there's no secret formula, and people should stop looking at someone else's playbook. I think you definitely learn lessons from others, but like we talked about, it's going to be different for you than it is somebody else. You're going to be in a different location. You're coming up at a different time. No, the variables, you can't just take someone else's playbook and just automatically kind of copy paste it into your situation. So I can't tell you the number of times a podiatrist asked me, just tell me what to do. Dr. So-and-so does, and do the exact same thing for me. In most cases, it doesn't work like that. Their market is different. Their patient demographics are different. Their competition is different. What does work is understanding the fundamentals, applying them to your specific situation. So, patients search for Google when they they have a foot problem. We know that. They look at reviews. They check your website. They check. They decide in minutes if you're the right person for them. So those truths don't change. How you apply them. A rural practice versus a downtown practice. A surgeon versus someone who likes to do orthotics. Your competitors are running kind of a generic playbook. You can beat them by being more specific.
Yeah, I think I always get amazed when somebody will see what somebody else is doing and they think, oh, I have to do that because it must be working for them because they've seen their ads. And it doesn't mean that it's been successful. There's a particular company at the moment in Australia, the Australian company, who's blurting out every time I go on Instagram, Facebook, they've got ads running. Sometimes I'll be scrolling through it and it's like every third or fourth ad is theirs. Just talking about their proven Facebook strategy on how to do something. But I remember 12 months ago, they were saying, Facebook is dead. Don't use it. We've got this other strategy. And I'm thinking, hang on, this contradicts exactly what you said before. And they're just jumping from one thing to the next. And obviously, they must be doing it tougher because I've never seen so much advertising from the beginning of January right through until now. Just constantly pushing it. Yeah, because they know people see that and they just eat it up. So they just keep doing it.
Yeah, that must be either working or we don't know behind the scenes though, right? So, these kind of templated, whether it be websites or big vendors, they just do what everyone else does, right? And the the opportunity to be unique, to show value in ways that are not being seen. But like I said, the fundamentals stay consistent. So patients search via Google. Sometimes even these new things like ChatGPT or Claude. They read reviews. They visit websites. They're trying to find ways to find trust signals, to make sure that you're the right clinic for them. So those things, the way you apply it to a rural clinic in Wisconsin versus a downtown Chicago practice, they're going to be a bit different, but the fundamentals are the same.
You're just going to stop watching what everybody else is doing and just focus it on what you want to do and what's going to serve your community the best.
That's perfect advice.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. So the last point is really just there's no better time to get started than today. The best time to get started was 2 years ago, and the second best time to get started is today. So pick your
Isn't
lane
that like
based on
planting a tree? Isn't that a Chinese proverb about planting a tree?
maybe I don't know. I didn't. It's not original for me. It's somewhere I picked that up somewhere before.
Okay,
Um,
sorry.
That's okay. But you got to pick your lane kind of based on where you are right now. So, if you have more, we talked about this in the past, if you have more time than money right now, go claim or update your Google Business profile. It's free. It takes an hour. Probably the single highest leverage thing you can do for your local visibility. If you have budget and you're nervous, maybe pick a procedure you want to do more of, not five, just one to build, a great page, either yourself or working with someone like a marketer that could do that for you. That's your beachhead, right? Everything else comes later. And if you're, meaning to do something about your marketing, for over a year, stop researching, stop comparing options. The perfect moment, like I said, the perfect time to do that was last year, and the best time to do it is today. So, be more, taking action is going to lead to results, and just sitting back and doing nothing is going to, not only be like kind of status quo, but long term that's a negative. You're going to be heading down the wrong path by not taking action, because by not deciding, you're still making a decision.
That's a great quote that I have heard somewhere else before as well. But yeah, it's true. If you don't decide, you've actually made a decision. So we will say, I don't want to make a decision. But if you don't do anything, you've already decided.
It's a song. I'm trying to remember what song it's. If you still cannot decide, you still have made a choice. I don't know if it's like, yeah, maybe I don't know if it's Pink Floyd or who it is.
See, we need to do a bit more research before we press record so we can
That's
actually throw it
okay.
out there. But some of these comments just come about because we're talking. But I think I mentioned on the podcast that there was someone I was talking to in Cairns, and their parents were looking at a unit on the Gold Coast, and at the time it was 1.1 million. And they were retiring and thinking, should we or shouldn't we? Should we or shouldn't we? Now they had the money to do it, but they went, oh, well, just wait. They waited 2 years, and now their apartment's like 2.5 million. They can't afford it. Just by waiting 2 years. I think when it's your business and there's certain things you know you should be doing and you keep putting it off. I think Tim Ferriss had a quote, because I used it at a recent workshop. I can't remember word for word, but he's basically saying busyness is a sign of laziness,
Yeah,
because you use being something along the lines of you use being busy as an excuse not to do the things that you know you really should be doing.
that's a good point.
It was said a little bit better than that. But that was the guts of it. So people will say, "Oh, I'm too busy to do this. I'm too busy to. I know I should be doing this, but I'm too busy." But those things they're putting off are so important. It's like your health. If you know there's something wrong with you and you keep putting it off because you think it's going to go away because you're too busy with your patients, who will my patients see? They'll see somebody else when you're in a box.
Yeah, we only have a limited amount of time here on this blue dot, so you got to make the most of it, right?
I know. Okay, where do we move on from here?
Yeah, I would just add a little bit to that. That, like talked about, if people have been stalling for a period of time, it's time to take action. Even little, taking little steps is better than just kind of maintaining the status quo. So, every imperfect thing you do, um, unless it's really, really bad, like maybe I should put a little bit of a qualifier there. It's like, making sure that, you know, every little step you do is going to move you to where you want to go. So, the only real failure is never really starting. So I think that's a really, really important thing to kind of wrap up there. And I would say, staying stuck, carries its own costs, to kind of provide kind of an overview of what we're talked about tonight. It's just a really, really slow one. Fear shrinks when you make it specific and you run actual numbers. Talking about those 3 different kind of podiatry paths, maybe you don't know what you want to do, and that's okay. But that uncertainty can lead to some pretty great results. So there's no secret formula, just kind of fundamentals that are applied in your specific situation. And the best thing you can do this year is get started. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. You know what you want to build. I'm sure if you spend some time reflecting, like Tyson and I mentioned in previous podcasts, spend some time about who's your ideal patient, what do you want to see more of, what do you not want to see. Once you kind of just answer those questions for yourself, you'll have a better sense of the direction you want to head. So I really encourage people to embrace that uncertainty and to know that everybody kind of feels like an imposter either sometime or all the time, and that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's not okay to be paralyzed and not take action.
Yeah, the whole imposter syndrome, the amount of, look, in the Podiatry Legends podcast, over 400 episodes, the amount of guests I've had on there, and so many people off air when we're just talking. And these are some of the big names from the States that if people heard them say this, they would not believe me. And I said to them, just out of curiosity, did you ever have imposter syndrome? And these people are heads of universities, and they go, still do. I still concerned one day people figure out I'm not as good as what they think. So we all suffer that. So if you've only been out 1 or 2 years, or you've only had your business a couple of years, and you're thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. If people find out, I'm going to look really silly. Everybody is thinking exactly the same thing.
No, absolutely. And I think, like we talked about previously, that it's important to take action, right? So I'd really recommend people this week, you pick one thing. Maybe it's the type of procedure you want to do more of. Maybe it's take a look at your Google business profile. Maybe it's talking to a business coach like Tyson, or talking to someone who does marketing like myself, and just, commit to that decision that you've been delaying, and kind of measure, see how you're doing over the next 90 days, measure, take some daily reflection or weekly reflection to see, are you making progress towards that goal? Because you've got to get started in order to make the progress you want. So, if anyone's, gotten value from today's, podcast, and feel like there's things that could benefit others, share this with them, send your friend a text message with a link to the podcast, or send a colleague an email. The more people that hear about our podcast and they can really kind of take action, not only with their marketing, but their practice in general, I think the more successful and the more kind of uplift we can provide to the profession. So we really appreciate everyone that listens so far, but it'd be great if we get some additional listeners to help us spread this message.
Yeah. Don't keep this information to yourself. If you found this episode helpful, I'm sure you have podiatry friends that would find it useful. So just say to them, next time you bump into them, by the way, are you a fan of the Podiatry Marketing Podcast with Tyson Franklin and Big Jim Mack? And see what they say. And if they say, I've never heard of it, you have done them a favor by letting them know about the podcast. And then after you've done that, because you've raved about it, perfect time to do a rating and review while you're talking about it, because you probably showed them on your phone, hey, this is what the podcast is all about.
And yeah, if people have gotten value from it, it's only the right thing to do to share with other people. So go ahead and share.
Oh yeah, if you keep it to yourself, you're a total bastard. You're an awful person. Yeah, you're a terrible person if you don't share it.
Fantastic.
Okay, Big Jim.
Leave it at that.
We'll leave it on that note. We've just offended everybody who's been listening to the show for a while. But don't worry, we'll be back next week to offend them some more.
Sounds like a plan, Tyson.
Okay, I look forward to it. See you later, Jim.
Bye now.